Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Amazing Podcast. And over here, we talk about all things cloud native, DevOps, Kubernetes, and we talk about not just tools, we talk about methodologies, we talk about approaches of doing things, which is, beneath even the tools themselves. And uh, you're going to love today's discussion if you're interested in learning about how you can do DevOps and cloud native better. I'm Dwayne Taylor, editor at amazic.com, and we're crazy about the cloud native space. So if you like what you hear here, visit our website, amazic.com. Check out all that we do. Got a lot of articles, job listings, and a whole lot of stuff there. So definitely go check that out. And our topic for today is incident management. I've always been fascinated and curious about incident management over the years because I think it's so essential. And, I just love how there's just so many well thought out processes when it comes to incident management and ideas that, you can use to greatly improve how you build and ship software. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have with us someone from an organization that's really innovating in this space. And the company is the URL and the name of the company itself is incident.io. Doesn't get more simple than that. It's an amazing domain. And I have with me Chris Evans, who is the co-founder and chief product officer at Incident. Chris, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
All right, Chris. So as we get started, I'd like if you could give us a quick intro about yourself and what led you to incident.io.
Yeah, sure. So I guess like my background is sort of in engineering. So left uni having done like maths degree and computer science masters and went straight into a software engineering role where I spent best part of like 10 years. So sort of doing everything from like low level, like embedded software, sort of coding in like C and C++, right through to like building web apps and stuff like that. And then sort of later in my career, I sort of caught the really early wave of Docker when it came out and started using that to essentially distribute applications that we were writing at the company I was at the time. And then Docker sort of naturally led me onto Kubernetes, and then Kubernetes became like a real fascination and ended up drifting into like running platform teams and sort of getting much more aligned with that. And so that was sort of like the career trajectory. And then immediately before starting this company, Incident.io, I was at a company here in the UK called Monzo, which is sort of like a, where when I joined, it was like a trendy kind of scale up bank. It's now like a systemic, very, very important bank here in the UK that has sort of, I think, seven and a bit million accounts held in it now. It was a few 100,000 when I joined. So sort of over my time there, went through a really quite interesting growth journey with that company. So, from essentially a very small AWS bill to a very big AWS bill and all the complexity that comes along with that. And part of my sort of role at Monzo was also looking after all of on-call. So I took Monzo from a world where there were essentially like, I don't know, 4 or 5 engineers on call through to being over 100 engineers on call, everyone being responsible for the sort of software that they're building, running it in production, that kind of thing. And then naturally the kind of place that went is then into incident management. And so got looped into a lot of incidents at Monzo. I started the incident manager function, which was a sort of like rotation of people who just were drafted in to help sort of coordinate the more severe incidents that we had there. And as part of sort of being involved with that, spotted a bunch of problems that Monzo had, which was just like incidents were really chaotic. They were hard to run. I think you mentioned this right at the beginning, which is like, there's a lot of processes that exist around incidents, and there sort of wasn't really anything good that was, or any software that was around that would help like run those things. And so I ended up writing, what is like a laughably simple Django project essentially that was Python code that just helps to orchestrate some of the incidents by plugging into Slack and sort of being a nice place for people to sort of run these things. I later open sourced it after giving some conference talks, and it essentially got like thousands of stars on GitHub, did really well. And that was sort of like the very early spark, I guess, for Incident.io.
Wow. Okay, that's cool. What's the project again on GitHub?
It's called Monzo Response. I don't believe
Okay.
they're actively supporting anymore because they
All
ended
right.
up bringing it in house because supporting the open source and the internal one was a bit complicated. But there's still people using it. I think there's still active sort of contributions going there. But yeah, it's still a useful sort of entry point if anyone's looking for a good way to sort of up level their incident management without any additional sort of overheads.
All right. All right. Neat. Yeah. Talking about incident management, if you can start with giving us sort of a definition, to sort of, because everyone could probably have a different understanding of what it means. So if you could tell us what it means to you, that'd be a great start.
Yeah, I think like the really short answer is like incident management is about like responding to like managing and coordinating and then learning from things that go wrong in organizations. And it's it's pretty critical to every organization because honestly, every organization has things going wrong. Like any company that's reached any kind of size of success, whatever the measure of that is, that like there is complexity behind that, and complexity breeds problems, and like it's essentially like an essential domain for folks. And so, yeah, when we talk about incident management, we mean like how does someone report that something's gone wrong? How do we make sure that the right people are involved from end to end? How do we make sure that we've done everything we need to from sort of policy points of view, from external regulatory points of view, if they apply, and how do we make sure that we're sort of sharing learnings across an organization, tracking actions that come out of them, all the way through to communicate with customers as well. That's a very, very important part for businesses. And so it sort of encompasses that whole life cycle of like something goes wrong, organization gets better as a result of that happening.
A key word I think that you mentioned is learning from what's going wrong. And I think that's, it's pretty hard to actually do that, in reality. For a lot of people, that's kind of like, a nice to have. Maybe someday we learn from, things that are going wrong. For now, we've got to fix stuff. And you mentioned on-call. On-call duty is obviously, the people on on-call duty are the ones that face the brunt of this. If you could talk a bit about just this process of how organizations move from firefighting and just getting through the day to actually being more strategic and saying, hey, we need something like incident management. What are some of those signs that really make that shift?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like the point around learning being hard is also really interesting because I think we hear this a lot with customers, which is like one of the problems we're having is we're not learning. And I think when people say that, what they mean is they're not sort of explicitly learning. They're not sort of getting to the end of an incident, doing some fantastic write-up that gets shared across the organization. And then, everyone goes, aha, I'm going to feed that into my future designs for systems or my software I'm writing, that kind of thing. So I think like that is the part that most organizations are missing, is like, I guess, like explicit learning. I think what organizations are like, you basically can't avoid is like the kind of implicit learning, which is like, if we run incidents, and we work together with a few people from different teams or different disciplines, like there is guaranteed learning happening because people are developing a bit of operational expertise and a bit of operational muscle. And so we like, one of the things that we do a lot of work with our customers with is taking them a bit on that journey from that, as you said, like the chaos and slightly like, things are ad hoc, and we put a bit of structure around it and sort of helpful structure, not and sort of automation rather than like machines taking over. Like that's not the intention. Like incident management is like an inherently human discipline. Essentially, it's like, when everything else has failed and all your technical controls have failed that try to prevent things going wrong, essentially what you have is humans at the backstop there. And so our like incident IO, the whole point of that is it should be very human friendly software that can sort of start to put in a bit of light structure. And what you get out the back of that is essentially like some sort of disciplined process that helps take you from that kind of chaotic, no one really knows what they're doing and learning is all implicit, through to there's a very structured process in place. Everyone sort of knows what they're doing. When you sort of reach for something, it's in the right place with our software and you can sort of get things done. And you can start to build towards slightly more structured learning, which is like, well, it's a lot easier now to do write-ups, and it's a lot easier for us to now share actions or to share things that we found difficult in those incidents and provide feedback that gets sort of shared with the organization. And so that's sort of like roughly the journey that we will take people on.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of how even, some of the trends with documentation today, where, instead of leaving docs to get outdated, you kind of try to codify or bring, code and docs more closer so that they're always updated automatically. As the app changes, the docs get updated automatically. It kind of reminds me of that. And, you mentioned structured learning. And definitely, there's a part where it's about the mindset, which is, I think, the foundation. And there's a part where you need tooling that enables, the mindset, those processes. Could you just flesh this idea a bit more for us, structured learning, how it works? What is the kind of mindset that an organization needs to start this thing with structured learning? What are some of the, easy things they could get started with? What's the low-hanging fruit? And what are some of the things they could work towards later when it comes to structured learning?
Yeah, good question. I think if you look at the core of it, like most organizations and most people within organizations want to learn. Like no one wants to be in a position where they're in like repeat incidents or feeling like they are sort of on the receiving end of a bunch of bad stuff that they have no control over. And so like the process for us like is relatively simple. And like I should say as well, like often there are like phrases thrown around like, tools can't fix bad culture, or you can't affect like organizational change by like throwing some software at it. And like I sort of agree with it in principle. I think there is like the bad interpretation of that, which is like someone at the top of an organization goes, there's a problem, I'm going to throw some money at it and some SaaS product will drop in and fix all my problems. And I think that's like bad interpretation of that. But I think software that is genuinely useful, software that feels like pleasurable and like a delight to use, has a great experience around it, and is sort of designed for the broad set of users that need to use it. I think that can affect cultural change and sort of help to drive some of that. And that's sort of, I mean, I don't want this to sound too lofty, like we're sort of trying to fix the world, right? We're building incident management software, but fundamentally, like we think about this a lot. And so when like putting some sort of meat around that, like our software sits right within Slack. Like it's not like a platform that we expect people when something goes wrong to sort of like be communicating in Slack and then jump out and use our web UI to go and do things. Like we sit right within Slack, and our kind of expectation is, whilst you're responding to incidents, the only place you should interact with us is through Slack, because that is where you are. We will come and meet you there. That is where your whole organization is. And incidents, as I said, like they're human problems and they're whole organization problems typically, which is like, yes, normally people will talk about incidents in the context of engineering things going wrong. So a database is broken, a service deployment failed, whatever else it might be, we haven't scaled enough. But when those things happen, they drift outside of engineering. So the implications of those kinds of problems are customers are impacted, executives might need to make decisions, or risk and compliance people might need to file reports somewhere. And so our software, the way it helps is it brings everyone into that sort of level playing field and helps them to all sort of get what they need from like the incident management process. And the sort of byproduct of all of this stuff is that we have really good data. We know who's involved. We know when people joined. We know who was active, so we can start doing accurate, like, here's how much time you're spending as an organization on reactive work, and here are the kinds of disciplines that are benefiting from this, and here's all the incidents that impacted these customers. And that sort of stuff is like this sort of self-fueling flywheel, if you like, where it's sort of delightful to use. Because it's delightful to use, people use it more, and people use it more, we generate more useful insight, and because there's more insight, people want to start declaring more things. So we have this sort of slightly weird thing we see with customers, which is like, there are some people who come to us and go like, my goal is to reduce the number of incidents that I have, and we have to sort of give them the bad news that like it's unlikely our software is going to do that. In fact, it's very likely, and we see it most commonly, that we see folks have more incidents after they deploy incident IO. And that's not because something bad has happened, it's because it was that much easier to run an incident, and therefore people have done it more. And the benefit of that is that you now have insight into your organization. So this whole bunch of sort of work that was previously flying under the surface is now visible to you, and you can start to see like, oh my gosh, like how much time are we spending dealing with system X that we didn't know about? Maybe we should invest some sort of measures there to sort of proactively try and drive reliability into it. And so there's a whole ton of benefits there across the board.
There's a lot to unpack there, and we definitely will be getting into some of those features you mentioned, like the integration with Slack and stuff. But I just want to talk a bit about kind of the slightly more advanced folk who probably have gone beyond the firefighting stage and they're doing some form of incident management. And they probably are even using an incident management solution. But then they're listening to this because, they're interested, they want to know more, they want to improve it even more. What would you say to those kind of folk who already have something in place and are wondering, what are some signs that, I could get more out of my incident management processes? What's the next level for me? Or another way to put it is when you look at your customers who probably have chosen incident.io from coming from another incident management tool, what are some of the reasons that motivates them to make the switch? I don't know if that's kind of making sense, but.
Yeah, it's making sense. I think there's a few things in there. There is so we see like there are a number of like incident management platforms that have existed for quite a long time. And I think a lot of people have recognized that they're sort of not keeping pace with how their organization works. And so honestly, like a lot of people who come to us have come to us having written tooling themselves, exactly like I was at Monzo, where, I was like, I have nothing that meets the needs of my organization, which is when I'm actually responding to incidents, it is really, really hard. And therefore I have this disjoint process where some system notifies me on my pager or my phone, then it's like all me with my sort of software in the middle. And then it's like, because it's software in the middle, it's not really been built brilliantly and it's not had all the investment that it needs in it. And so everything then suffers sort of later down the timeline there. So there is like a big category of people who just come to us with like, I built a thing, it's not good enough and it's taking too much time and effort. Then there are folks who have sort of picked a more modern incident management platform and have found that it is excessively like engineering centric, which is sort of, I think, sort of dotted lines into some trends that we're seeing in organizations, which is like incident management, I think, has historically been very aligned to like, I'm an SRE or a DevOps type person, or I run platforms and, that's my domain and I'm going to run incidents and I'm going to track all these like sort of vanity metrics or whatever else is there. And I think that we're seeing this shift where people are like, I need my customer support people to have information and like, I need sales to be able to know when incidents are impacting prospects that they're trying to sell to, or customer success folks to be able to proactively reach out, and even just like broad one-to-many customer comms. Like I need the right information at the fingertips of people who control our status page, because without that we're either not putting it up and customers are getting increasingly frustrated that when we're down, they go to our status page and there's a big green tick there and it's incredibly frustrating, or we're putting poor quality updates there. And I think when you start to sort of like put it like that, there is like a shift of people who are like, I need something that keeps pace with what the organization needs. So that's like, I think broadly how we're seeing like, people moving around in the sort of incident management space. And then honestly, there are some people who are sort of looking at the benefits that they're getting from incidents. And I think there's like an acknowledgement that there's like multiple levels of benefits that you can get from incidents. So if you look at like the really simple things you get by running incidents very well, right? You get like maybe faster resolution times, or, immediate cost savings because, fewer people need to be involved. And you might get some sort of like short-term customer sentiment because that incident you ran once really well, you put a status page up and you shared the updates really, really well. And so people sort of like, first order benefits kind of thing. And then you get to like people striving to do even better than that. And they're like, well, what I really care about is like developing, I don't know, like operational expertise across my organization. I want people to get stronger as a result of being able to have multiple incidents. And I want to be able to predict a bit more about what's going to happen in future to the degree to which that's possible. And like risk management and time tracking and those sorts of things. And I think that's where a platform like Incident.io kind of slots in, and that we are very focused on sort of not just the immediate, like, you won't see on our website, for example, like, hey, come here and we'll reduce your mean time to recovery. It's just like not where we're particularly interested, and I don't think it's that valuable to organizations. So yeah, feel like I've gone on a very long tangent to your question here, but hopefully hit at least some of it.
No, I think I love that you brought in so many different perspectives that so many different people could have. And there's so much to dig into. I like also, especially the last point you mentioned, which is not just all about MTTR, that you can be way more strategic if you don't obsess over that metric. That was a really cool point you made. Yeah, just various levels that people are from really described it really well. Building their own tools to trying to predict, risks ahead of time. Just so much variety when it comes to just what people look for from incident management. We talked about the problems. We talked about the different backgrounds and the journeys of different users when it comes to people. When it comes to incident management, I want to get to your product that you're building, and if you could tell us in brief, what is Incident.io and what does it bring to the table that's different? And you already kind of chimed in, you already kind of teased us in your previous two responses, but yeah, if you could give us kind of the elevator pitch for Incident.io.
Yeah, it's sort of becoming increasingly difficult to give an elevator pitch because the product's getting quite broad. But if I essentially, so we are an incident management platform, right? So we are the sort of the system you turn to when something goes wrong within your organization, is the sort of slightly pithy way of saying that. If we look at like how we help, so first thing we do when we work with customers is we ingest a lot of context from their organization. So we have a product called Catalog, part of the product called Catalog, which is essentially it allows you to sort of plug into whatever systems of record exist in your organization and pull that data in as sort of, we're not duplicating it, we're sort of becoming a shadow copy of that. So good examples there are, if people have a service catalog that maps out, their services, their infrastructure, the teams that own them, code repositories, that kind of thing, that covers a lot of like engineering domain that we can import into Incident.io to give some context around that part of the organization. We can also plug into your sales CRM. And so we can pull in things about the customers that you are selling to, or your customer success platform, and pull in all of that information. And that is in our context on those things. We can then pull in like the hierarchy of your organization with teams and various things like that. And we can start to connect all those different things together. And that is sort of like one part of the picture. It's like context that's very powerful for incident management. With that, we then have this kind of ability to run incidents. So we can either plug into alerting tools, PagerDuty, OpsGenie, various other things that are essentially the tools that alert someone that something's gone wrong. And so if someone is alerted, we can plug that straight into Incident.io and we can create incidents off the back of it. We can also manually create incidents if someone wants to raise the alarm and we haven't detected it. And then the core of the product is help you to run your actual incident response process kind of end to end. So we have a part of the product called Workflows, which is essentially like lightweight automation that you can have across your incident. So a good example might be, if the incident is affecting our payments engine and it's a critical or a Sev one, automatically page the CTO, pull them into the channel, send an email to a particular distribution, sort of simple things like that. So not trying to get in the way, not trying to sort of like overly automate the whole incident response process, but make sure that a lot of the cognitive load is taken off of the folks that are responding to incidents directly. So then we put, integrations with all the software you use already. So if you're using Jira to track, or Linear to track, your tickets or whatever else it is, or status page for communicating publicly, or we have a status page product ourselves. Like all of these things are put at your fingertips right from that Slack channel. So Slack gives us these sort of powerful ways to be able to invoke those things. So you never have to leave Slack unless you're actually going to kind of fix the thing. And then what happens next is we have a whole sort of part of the platform which is devoted to learning and post incidents. So help you to curate a timeline to produce a post-mortem or incident debrief document. We help you to track the actions that come out of your incidents and put them into Linear, Jira, Asana, wherever else it is that you store your things, but give you sort of good ways to visually see how you're doing, tracking actions, that sort of thing. And then right the way through, we then give you the sort of the power and the tools to then look at like your incidents at the aggregate level. So like what insights can we derive from how our organization is running incidents and dealing with those things? So how much time as an organization are we spending in reactive work kind of operation? That is something that's useful to know, because if that gets too high, that is essentially like crushing our ability to do proactive, like roadmap planned work. And we can start to see what percentage of our workforce is like accustomed to responding to incidents or leading incidents, because that's a good marker of like operational maturity across the organization. How penetrated is that? So hopefully that sort of gives you a sort of broad shape of like where the platform fits in. So it's sort of like a end-to-end incident management sort of solution for you.
Great. Wow. So that is a lot that you explained, and you actually answered a lot of the questions that I already had prepared for later, but we can still get into some of those. You know, it's you also got a demo prepared for us that you've recorded and like us to watch that now, which is a walkthrough of the product.
Hey, so here's a really, really quick whistle-stop tour of the Incident IO platform. So what you're seeing here on my screen is like the main landing page dashboard of Incident IO. So I can see at a glance any live incidents that are happening. I can see the sort of history of all of my incidents. This shows me when stuff was happening. And then I will gloss over policy violations and follow-ups, but essentially like help you to keep track of like what's going on with things after incidents. We can jump into any one of these and sort of get a bit more information, and I can go in here and maybe request updates from folks who are dealing with this. I can see exactly what status it is in. This is like my command center for someone outside the incident to be able to see very clearly what's happening. Behind the scenes, we can see sort of full timelines here being built up, so everything that's happening is sort of being logged here. If we then sort of skip on, like how do we actually then run an incident with Incident IO? So our sort of philosophy here is that when you are dealing with incidents, you do not want to be on someone else's platform elsewhere. You want to be sort of dealing with the incident right where you're communicating. And so for us, that looks like, and for our customers, that looks like being able to coordinate an entire incident right from within Slack, which is where all of their communication's happening. So we can kick off incidents incredibly quickly here. So I can jump in and say, Amazic.com is down, for example. I will skip over this, but we can essentially capture any sort of information that we want there as well. What do we get off the back of that? Well, we get a beautifully like clean space for us to now deal with this incident. So I've got now a clean Slack channel. I can take the lead at this point. I can integrate with all of the tools that I use already. So if I'm using Status Page or I'm using PagerDuty, whatever it might be, everything is kind of at your fingertips. So slash commands, buttons, all that kind of thing. So I will spare my phone the voicemail from PagerDuty, but this is now how I can get hold of folks. So that is sort of like very, very quickly what's going on inside of Slack. Other things that are happening. So we are sort of announcing that this incident's happened. Anyone can see this. It's very clear for everyone exactly what's going on, and people can jump in and help if they need to. Nice. So what else is in the platform? So obviously you run your incidents here. We now become the system of record for incidents. So you can jump in and you can see everything that's going on. So I could say what's happening that's impacting Kubernetes, for example. I can sort of jump in and find incidents where I maybe was one of the participants in there. So I can jump in and say participants includes me. Which will be all of them because it's my demo account. But we can start to do very sort of rich ways of sort of slicing and dicing this data. Folks can save these things as filters, so you can have teams that have their own views of their things that are going on there. Moving on, like where else can we go with that? Well, we have this part of the product called Insights, where I can now jump in and see where, sort of more richer analytics than just like system of record type things. But like if I look at all of my incidents over the last 12 months, like how much time in aggregate am I spending across my teams in incidents? So this is actually sort of realistic data from a real account. And you can see here sort of broken down by the time of day. So whether it's sort of working hours, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. or, late or sleeping, like how much time are we spending on reactive workload here? So really helpful for debugging, like perhaps we have too much going on that is sort of driving incidents and we should sort of press pause on some development and maybe look at some reliability increasing measures. Bunch of other useful things in Insights there too. Other things we do, we help you track all of the sort of follow-up work that comes out of your incident. So, you create a bunch of actions, will typically be the case off the back of an incident. And I don't want those to live within Incident IO. That's not helpful for me. I want them to live on the backlogs or for the teams that are going to do that work. And for customers, that might mean Jira, it might mean Linear, it might mean putting them on Asana. Wherever it is, we can put them out there and then we become sort of like a shadow copy of that follow-up. And we give you this sort of ability to now see across all your incidents how you're doing there. You can do things like set policies on these as well. So you could say, I want all of my actions to be done for critical incidents within 2 weeks. And we will help you to sort of keep track of those things and see what's violating policies, that kind of thing. Sort of continuing the whistle stop tour, catalog is a huge part of the platform. This is where you can bring all of the context of your organization into Incident IO. So we don't want to become like a duplicate source of data, as I said. We want to become sort of like complementary to that. And so here I can bring in things like teams and business functionalities and sort of services that exist here. And I can then import the data from those on an ongoing basis from whatever system is the place where those things are normally kept, so whether it's Backstage or ops level or Cortex if you're using service catalogs, or your HR system if that's where you manage your sort of team structures. You bring them here and we can start to do much richer things with incidents, whether it's like tagging them to these entities or being able to sort of navigate things, so I can report an incident and say, well, this business functionality is down, and I know that I can hop from that business functionality to the team that owns it, and from that team that owns it down into their PagerDuty service, and so I can automatically page them using a part of the product called Workflows. I will skip over the details of Workflows, but essentially this becomes a really powerful like automation engine that exists inside of sort of your incidents. If we move on, sort of other parts here, so we have a status page product. You can do all of the things that you'd expect to be able to do here. So this is basically for publishing updates to your customers that are not within your company. And so we can sort of manage like live events, we can see past events, we can schedule things like maintenance here. And you can of course like brand it to look like your own company. So here is a sort of mock one that I have running for Incident.io. I can jump into any of these incidents and I get to see nice updates here about everything going on there. So that is broadly where the platform is at. A ton of functionality, whistle stop tour, basically. Could spend hours talking about all the various different things that you can do here, but hopefully that gives you a quick overview of how things look on Incident.io. Cheers.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris, for that recording. And, it definitely looks exciting, just the things that are possible with Incident.io. So, I want to ask about you mentioned workflows earlier, and I want to also ask about alerts, because, one of the things with incident management is alert fatigue and just, reducing false signals. So, if you could talk a bit more on that. You mentioned workflows and how there's some automation built into, the product where you can notify certain people, the right people at the right time, I guess. Is there more to prioritizing alerts, or is it part of the workflows feature of the product?
Yeah, so alerts are an interesting one. I think if you sort of look at the timeline of an incident, you've essentially got, and we're going to, I guess, walking through like from something going wrong to us our monitoring systems picking it up. You've essentially got, your database explodes and your monitoring system picks it up. You fire an alert hits a paging tool typically then hits Incident.io. That's roughly the kind of flow that we have there. So sort of alerts specifically fall semi outside of our remit. We sort of think that's a very bespoke job that is best left to monitoring and alerting tools. So your Prometheus, your Alert Manager, Datadogs, whatever else it might be. And those tools have like very bespoke ways of being able to sort of, either group alerts by time, by content, by, AI magic or whatever else it is that they offer. However, like when it comes to the alerts that flow through into Incident.io, we do have a few levers that we can sort of pull there. So we have a part of the product called triggers, and this was something that we were actually incredibly reluctant to build, or personally, I was very reluctant to build in the early days. And this is essentially do we want to allow, when I'm paged, for that to automatically create an incident inside of Incident.io? And that means, creating a new Slack channel, creating a new thing, announcing it, letting everyone know that things happened. And sort of my original perspective on this was, I don't think we should do that because we lose the sort of signal on those sorts of things. I'm sure you will have seen it in the past where, something goes wrong and you have a flurry of alerts fire and everyone just is like, mute the channel or stop my alerts coming through because there's so much noise there, and you sort of tune them out a little bit. That was where I was sort of concerned we would get to. Anyway, fortunately, I worked with some incredibly smart product engineers who sort of overruled and pushed really hard on this. And what we ended up building was what feels like a really great compromise here, which is we will let you automatically create incidents and a new channel for managing those in Slack when something comes in from PagerDuty. And what we do to solve the kind of repeat spamming of PagerDuties come through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many times, is we give this kind of like right of first refusal to those alerts to claim them within the first incident. So I jump in, the workflow would be, I'd be paged, I'm automatically invited to a Slack channel. So when I'm bleary-eyed at 2 a.m., I walk down to my laptop, Incident.io has already spun up my sort of incident there. It will have run any workflows that I've got configured. So if I need other things in there or runbooks posted in, they'll be there ready for me. And then if subsequent alerts come in, I will get a small little message in the channel that says, hey, another page has come in. Is it part of this incident? I'll be like, yep, that's part of my incident. And you essentially claim it. We acknowledge and silence the page so you don't get any more of those, and you continue working. And if more things come in, you just like, yep, this is part of mine. Now, if something comes in that is not part of that incident, you're like, absolutely not. This is not my responsibility to deal with. This is an entirely separate part of whatever organization I'm at. I can say, no, this is a new incident. It will spin up a new incident and it will go and find the right person who should be dealing with that elsewhere. And it works just phenomenally well, much better than I anticipated it would do. And so we use that internally. We use our own platform for running our own incidents, and we have it plugged into PagerDuty, and it just feels very ergonomic. It's like I get to have all the sort of signal that I need from, this is a real thing, and I get to claim all these alerts. And then I have additional sort of observability around like, well, how many, I can go back to incidents and go, show me all the incidents where there were like more than 5 PagerDuty pages that came through to it. And that's a place where I can go and be like, well, maybe I can tune my sort of alerts at source there, because that's too much going on. So, Alert Manager has this concept of like suppression rules. So you could say, if the database is down or an entire region is down, like silence all the other alerts that have, a tag of the same region kind of thing. And I think sometimes folks are missing just the information at the sort of end of the incident management process to be able to go back to source and go, well, we can fix that and we can make that better.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds really interesting that it automates so much of the stuff that once you get in, you're already running with a lot of the basic stuff in place. That's really cool. And I'm curious to know more about the kind of change that incident.io has, the influence it has on the on-call duty engineer or the SRE, or the people using the tool, because products change the way we look at problems, or the things we're doing change the way we do them even. And one of the curious things that I saw mentioned on your website was about ownership, and talking about how incident.io helps with taking more ownership of incidents. And I think that really caught my attention. If you could explain that a bit more, how what's the connection? How does this happen?
Yeah. So my experience of like incident management in past companies has typically been from the side of the team that is typically holding the pager for all other teams. And that has been, I think for a few reasons. Like one of them is like many organizations haven't sort of started with the concept of you build it, you run it type of things. And they haven't had the concept of like, well, if you come and work here, an expectation of working here is that you'll be on call, and we will make that fair, and we'll make that like, as minimally impacting as possible. But like that is going to be an expectation, because someone needs to do it, and it makes sense for it to be the person who's sort of closest to that domain doing it. So many organizations haven't done that. So a lot of people are in this world where like operational ownership is separate from day-to-day building ownership. And part of the reason there is, as I said, like historic, it's hard to change things and sort of get people to agree to this. But part of it is also that the actual process that people need to follow when something breaks is kind of scary and kind of intimidating. And so, if I look at this, when we went through this journey at Monzo, like there was, we originally had like a sort of central on call. It was actually sort of like a shared rotation with people from all different teams, but it was a small one that was sort of not everyone was on call. And when I started going through the motions of trying to push for like individual teams to be there, like one of the most common bits of like pushback I got was like, I don't know how to run an incident. And it's kind of terrifying to be the person who is going to receive a page at 2 a.m. for a bank where customers need access to their money. And I don't know who I need to get hold of. I don't know what the workflow, the process, the run books are to do all these things. And that, I think, is an area that, like, because I've been through that and seen that and had to sort of push through that, like that's very much factored into the tool. And that one of the whole purposes of the tool is that we can encode a lot of those processes. So what you need to know is how to declare an incident. And broadly speaking, like, as long as you can fix it, we should be able to sort of run the process for you. So we will be like, hey, you've mentioned that this is affecting this. The process, either you give nudges and you're like, the process that normally is followed here is that you should do this, this, and this, and you give it contextually at relevant times rather than in a big document, or you just do the thing when you go, oh, you've a great example actually of this from the days of Monzo was like we used to have a little bit built into the tool, like just hard coded into the tool, that if anyone in a channel mentioned the phrase like status page, it would automatically ping our press team, who might need to get ahead of any like press coverage that, negative press coverage that comes from us putting the status page up. And like a really early indicator of us before we even put the status page up would be someone going, do you think we should put up the status page and let our customers know? And so they would like plug in, and sort of you can start to just sort of cherry pick out of the process bits that are very easy to automate. And so the whole journey of like ownership, I think, starts with making it easy and appealing for folks to do. And I think when you can start to sell them on, first of all, it is easy to do it. Second of all, we will help run the process. And third of all, like, here are the benefits you will get by having more sort of ownership over the operation of your services. And that is everything from like personally developing a bit of muscle around like what it takes to operate services, but also as a team being able to have insights about how you're doing and sort of learn a bit more and feed that back into the development cycle. Like all of that starts to become a bit more possible when you have a tool like Incident.io. And like, again, don't want to like make this sound like it is going to fix everything at organizations. Like it takes an enormous amount of work from humans to sort of drive this and make these kinds of changes. But a tool that works and feels good is a really good place to start, I think.
Yeah, I love the status page example. And I think that those kind of things come from someone really in the trenches, really knows, those minute details of the whole process, and, is able to catch the kind of the things, the way people behave, and, build that into the product. So, I really love that example. And talking about things that are scary, it's not just when incidents come up, but it's about even writing that postmortem report afterwards, right? It's something that nobody wants to do, and no one wants to spend time on it. And then there's, of course, it's not a pleasant thing to write about. Does Incident.io help in any way with making writing postmortems easier, and maybe even more making people want to do it?
So this is actually, if I was to like give Incident.io a score out of 10 on different parts, like I would say our postmortem part of the product is probably like a 6 or a 6.5 out of 10. I think it is markedly better than anything else that exists, but I think we're still a little way off of it feeling magic and delightful. And we know this as a company, and we like want to get there. So if I look at how we help at the moment, like one of the really painful parts in my experience of like doing postmortems well has been like just getting to the point where you have the sort of the bare bones of a document with all of the right data, the right timestamps, and a good timeline in place, and maybe a way to sort of like turn a factual sort of audit traily timeline into more of a sort of narration of the incident, so I can sort of use that as my basis of like retelling the story of an incident. And so like we can do that stuff, and we integrate with things like Google Docs and Confluence and wherever else, Notion, wherever else you want to sort of store your documents. And so I think we do a very solid job of that side of things. But I think there is still work to be done for us on sort of making the process of actually running a debrief a lot better. So I think that still relies a lot on individuals being able to run those kinds of meetings effectively. And I think when you look at it, like the actual document is not the sort of the magic thing. It's the like, it, certainly not going into the meeting. What is magic is when you have this like fantastic like artifact that sparks a bunch of conversation, that sparks a bunch of like different perspectives from people in the incident, and that then sort of then gets captured into the document. So some of the problem we face is just like it doesn't happen on our platform. Like you start to sort of navigate these documents elsewhere, and then some of it is just like I think there are product problems, ways that our products can address like just running debriefs a little better. But yeah, broadly that's where we're at. I think it's like the best experience that you can get, and I don't think there's a few people who do similar things to us, helping you sort of curate their document. But I think as an industry we need to do better around like the whole kind of post-incident thing. And too many folks are like, honestly, like a lot of folks are just fixated on like the document needs to be written because someone said that I need to write the document, and really no one cares about it. And like my marker for success when we get there will be we don't just produce a document, but we produce something, and then we can track who's kind of seeing it and who cares about it. And what you want to see is that when someone shares an incident debrief, it's like, it's really good and people want to read it, and you kind of get, lots of feedback. And I think you see that, like I certainly saw that when I was at Monzo, we had a particularly bad outage where a big database operation we were doing, I ended up taking the bank offline for a few hours, and it was like a very thorny incident, like really taken seriously. And so I and one of the engineers that I was working with wrote up a very, very detailed public post-mortem of that incident. And I honestly, like, it was, it's never fun writing about those things, but I genuinely enjoyed the process of the two of us working together, really trying to spell this out in a really easy to consume way, and then sharing it and sort of owning up to where we didn't think we were as strong in our response or in our planning and those sorts of things. And honestly, like, that felt magic, but it was so much effort. It was a week of solid work to do this. And it was received so well by the public. And we got loads of feedback off of it. And, off the back of essentially, having customers not able to access their money for a period of time, we sort of turned that into oh no, these folks were doing the very best that they could. And they've sort of been very transparent about the sort of failure that they had there. And I think for me, that's where I want to get to with like internal postmortems and debrief write-ups, is that people really care, but it also, I'm very cognizant of, like, businesses have finite resources and finite time, and we can't expect everyone to write a debrief for a week after every single incident. So I think that is what I want to get to with the product, is that we solve some of that and we can produce high quality, but make it efficient and easy to do.
Wow, that's another great example you shared about just how to kind of respond after the incident, and not to just try to cover it up, but really face it head on and really be transparent. I think it definitely takes a lot of courage to do that, and especially to spend so much time to actually say in detail what happened. It makes a big difference, I think, during incidents. And I think that's a great point you make. As we wind down, I want to ask about what are some of the early results that you see from the customers that adopt incident.io? How soon do they see these results, and what are the results?
Yeah, it depends. It depends a lot on the kind of deployment that we see. So we have, some folks who choose to use us for, engineering incidents for very specific parts of the organization, and then there's other folks who, like, Etsy, rolling out our software to whole organization and sort of doing phenomenally well there. And I think, like, the results you see are sort of allude to some of the things I mentioned earlier around, like, some people just want to see an uptick in adoption, and they want to see more folks from more parts of the organization declaring incidents. And if that's what they want to see, like, that's how we'll work with them to sort of, drive for adoption. There's some people who want to get to faster resolution times, and so for those folks, it'll be like, great, well, where's the time going? How do we take some of the pain out of that? So, in many cases, that's like, oh, it takes me forever to go and find the access tokens to log into status page and put something up there. It's like, well, let's plug that in. Let's prompt when we, help you, figure out when you should put it up online, and those sorts of things. And so there's like those sort of like first order, I guess, benefits that people see. And then, I think when you start to see people running incidents well over like a sustained period, then there's like the, what are people looking for in terms of results in that regard? And a lot of people are like, well, I want to see like some form of like, feedback from customers that they feel like we're dealing with incidents better. And that comes as a result of like public comms being, happening better and more frequently, and that sort of things. And then like, incident expertise and things like that. So, how many folks are like commenting on debriefs that we share? So we have this ability to sort of share debrief documents inside of Slack, and how many folks are commenting on that and that sort of thing. And then when you look at sort of like, I think like the slightly harder to measure and longer term benefits that we're seeing with some customers, like there is this concept of like organizational de-siloing. So you have parts of the organization that typically don't work together. So like customer support and engineering, not typically two sort of parts of a company that work intricately close together until there's an incident, and then they work very, very closely together. And when you start to work closely together in incidents, it starts to foster a bit of a better kind of approach to them working together in normal work. And you see that with various other areas. So whether it's like that, and maybe even like product engineering and sales, right? Because sales are like, oh my gosh, you gave me all the information that I could go to that customer with, proactively because of whatever else. And so that's one there. And then like honestly, like some folks are just looking to improve like engineering culture and happiness and things like that. And, they move from this world where engineers find incidents like a massive drain on like their energy and happiness to it actually feeling like a really good thing. And so, yeah, I think seeing different benefits across like different sort of things, depending on the context, is like a highly context dependent thing, incident management.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many things that, that people look for with incident management. And it's great that so many of these things that incident.io caters to these needs. The last question I have for you, Chris, is, as you look at the future for incident management and things keep changing quite a bit, what do you see down the road? What's coming up for incident management? Where do you see incident.io, putting some of its, its energy towards, what's it going to build out? Where's this industry going?
Good question. I think incident management, like what we're seeing is it's feeling less like a sort of, something that organizations could do, and into something that organizations must do and must prepare for. I think a little bit like security, right? No organization is like, should I invest in security things? It's like, no, it's typically like for engineering orgs, it's like the priority 0 that exists ahead of all other priorities, like it must be secure. That is like a non-negotiable. And so I think like there is a world where incident management is becoming like that, which is like organizations cannot avoid things going wrong. The very best organizations are the ones that deal with that very well. And I think everyone has in the back of their mind, like those organizations, they know where, I think Slack's a great example of this actually. It's like the second Slack has an outage, right? And, you sort of look around the office and everyone's sort of like meerkat above the kind of the divides of like, is everyone else seeing this thing? And then you jump to status.slack.com and they're like, there's an issue, we're looking into it. And you're like, okay, cool, they're on it. Like, I feel really confident that they're doing things well. And because they're doing things well, I sort of have like this like deep-rooted trust that organization is building things well. And it sort of like really strengthens the relationship I have as a customer with Slack, which is like, they've had something go wrong and it's broken, but I'm actually sort of like, I like them more as a customer. I think the best organizations are the ones who are starting to be like that. And there's obviously a limit there, right? Taking to the extremes, like no one wants to be using a service which is forever down, right? It's not the intention, but it's like, if you acknowledge that people will have failure, people want to be dealing with the companies that handle that and communicate about that well. So yeah, I think that is the kind of, I think the future of like what I see with like incident management SRE is like, it's a non-negotiable. It is something that will increasingly be seen as like not engineering centric. So it applies to all corners of the org, and all corners of the org will get benefits from it. And I think we're seeing like early signs of that already. I mean, not even that early now, we're a few years in. So it's like, quite strong signs of that being the direction of travel.
Really interesting. There was a lot we covered. There were so many great points that you made, Chris, and I really appreciate just you sharing from all of your experience here. There was just so much to take away. Some of the key points that I kind of remember are about just not obsessing over mean time to resolution, rather being more strategic and trying to learn from incidents. And you call it, I think, systematic learning. And your various examples about just being transparent when an incident happens, about how you communicate and talk about it with your customers and team members. There was just so much to take away about automation. How not to overdo it, and some of the right ways to do automation as well, and how you guys have built that into incident.io. So it was definitely, quite a delightful conversation about incident management. So much to learn. Thanks so much, Chris. But before you go, though, we've got a couple of questions for you to get to know you a bit more. So yeah, here goes. What would be your alternate career path if not for your job in tech?
I'd be a pilot. I always wanted to fly planes. That was my dream from a really young age. It was unfortunately like put to bed early because I have color blindness, and you can't be a commercial pilot as far as I'm aware with that. But one day maybe.
Okay. All right. Do you research planes a lot?
I have got a very bad reputation in this company for being a massive plane nerd. So we have an office in New York. So I'm often flying between London and New York. And there is a hotel I stay at in Heathrow, which has rooms which, if you get the right room, you can overlook the runway of Heathrow. And I have been called out for putting like special requests in my bookings to be like, please, can I have a runway view room kind of thing. So yeah, massive plane nerd.
Wow. All right. What's the moment you knew that you were going to be a product guy?
I don't know that there was ever like a real like aha moment, but like from a really young age, I have like dabbled in just building things. And so like was, you know, writing code from a pretty young age, just like got hooked on that super early. And I think like those kinds of things just, I think they just like instill this kind of sense that when problems come up, you can build things, you can build little products, and like might be tiny little things, but like there's this like deep rooted, like I just want to solve those problems. And I think it's just been fueled from that really.
Wow. Which is one software tool or product that you think is very elegantly built?
Superhuman. So there's like an email client called Superhuman, and it often gets a lot of flack for being quite expensive for what it is, because essentially it sits on top of Gmail and other email providers, but it is the first tool that I've ever used where it has turned me into like an inbox zero person religiously every day. It is like everything is like keyboard commands. It is just like they have phenomenal support. The whole product kind of feels magic, and like the features that they're building are just like these really beautiful slices of like problems that I face day to day. So they have like connections into CRMs, and you know, you email someone and it's like, oh, here's more details about them. So I think it's a phenomenal product.
Oh, I gotta check that out. Complete the sentence. I can spend hours doing.
Hanging out with my children. So it's sort of like building a company puts a big drain on my time, and so I sort of every single minute I have that I'm not here. I've got two boys, like 10 and 8, and so they are at like just such a wonderful age to hang out with, like want to go and play football or just hang out together. So that is sort of my sort of like where I put all my social time.
Yeah, it's the best getaway. Complete another sentence for me. At a party or a conference, I'm usually the guy who.
So I again have another bad reputation here of talking about well, I don't even talk about it that much. It's kind of been spiraled out of control, but talking about my Tesla. So a massive treat to myself a few years back was buying a Tesla, not a super fancy one. I was fascinated by them from like a technological point of view, and I think they are phenomenal like nerd gadgets basically. And so I have a bad rep about talking about Teslas a lot.
All right, so you know what to talk to Chris about if you ever get to meet him. Which Tesla do you own, by the way?
It's a Model 3 Performance.
All right, neat.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, I haven't driven one myself, but hope to someday.
Yeah, my kids enjoy it a lot. It's yeah, driving it quick off the line is quite fun.
Wow. Awesome. On that note, we come to the end of our conversation. And thank you so much again, Chris. I enjoyed our conversation. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers as well learned a lot and really quite enjoyed this podcast with you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks to all of our viewers for joining us again. Do tune in for the next episode, and hope to see you there. Bye-bye.